recording today for on behalf of Joe Mallon Motors, Portlaoise and Naas, and I'm delighted. Obviously, I'm a proud brand ambassador for Joe Mallon Motors here in Portlaoise myself, but I'm delighted to be joined on a Zoom call by Anna Geary, who is a brand ambassador for Joe Mallon's up in Naas. Anna, you were telling me before we started that you've been going around the last couple of weeks in an Arkana. Tell us about this new Renault Arkana.
I have. So it's a hybrid car, and I think to me the biggest change that I actually found was the fact that it was an automatic. And when I told my dad, he was fierce impressed because he learned to drive. He told me in an automatic car. So when I've been driving manual stick all my life, so even changing to that, and I do quite like long journeys as part of my job, whether we're going to filming locations or I'm going down speaking at events. But I actually found there was a freshness in my legs after. I mean, it's essentially like driving a go-kart. Now, I did find at the start, you almost like subconsciously are looking for the clutch, like your leg is looking for the clutch. But after that, it was a dream to drive. And like, it's a hybrid car and it's self-charged. Because again, like when people think of electric, I think there's a lot of people out there that have a little bit of a fear of it. And I was definitely one of them. I put my hands up and say, I just was thinking long journeys, where will I find my charge points? And just it was an extra stress. Whereas with the hybrid, like it switches between petrol and electric depending on what it needs and depending on your journey, but then it's self-charged, so it charges itself. So I found that a dream. And like let's just say that Joe Mallon had to literally claw the keys back out of my hands afterwards, because I was surprised that I actually didn't want to give it back.
And did you have you were saying recently that you were obviously going back down towards home in North Cork, so not many electric charging points around Milford and Charleville and these places.
Yeah, not yet. We'll use the word yet, because obviously things are definitely going in that direction of the next few years. They have to. But yeah, I think the reality is, like, living above in Sallins, you know, and obviously being so near Stubborn, there is a lot more charge points. But the more rural you get, they're obviously less and less. So I suppose that's why it's for me, even the self-charge part of it was much better. Now, I'm sure if I looked hard enough, I would have found charge points. You know, we'd be pretty, metropolitan down there in the parts of Milford and North Cork. But yeah, it definitely is something that I think a lot of people should try out. I think they'd be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, Stephen Butler in Portlaoise and Joe Mallon's is telling me he has one for me to take for a weekend in a couple of weeks' time. But my key concern is that it's a nice height. You're still able to look over the ditches.
Oh, it is, because like obviously it's the combination. Like with the SUV, you are up that little bit higher. But I just thought it was a really comfortable drive. And I always know as well, because my dad sat into the car and even the seats and everything, there's a real luxurious feel to it. Like a lot of my friends that would be into cars, you know, even the back of it, if you looked at the exterior, very like stylish. It almost like looks like one of the Beamers, you know, and obviously the price point is completely different. So it does, even when inside, there's a very sports looks feel. So you can see why I didn't want to give it back. My Kajara is parked outside it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's never given me a day of trouble. But yeah, definitely, if they handed me one, I wouldn't say no.
Okay, yeah. Well, look, I'd say if you talk nicely to Anthony there, he might give you a can at the next time around.
Now, I think I kind of feel that it was a bit of a Top Gear moment there. I tell you,
if they're looking for salespeople, you know, you could do worse. Here, look, we were watching Ireland's Fittest Family last night, and I don't know what it's like for you. So you're there when it's been filmed, and then you're watching it at home, probably maybe like the rest of us, and the difference between one perception and the other. Last night was another brilliant episode, and the poor Mooney family. I thought it was somebody going to be paralysed.
Like, to be honest, I've been involved in Ireland's Fittest Family for 7 years, and like Stephen, every single time I'm involved, like there's always a shock. There's always something every season that throws up. But in 7 years, I have never seen anybody hang upside down on a ramp. Like, it was extraordinary. And to be honest, I was obviously focused on getting the O'Briens through to competition, getting them onto the next stage. But I couldn't help but look at Stephen Mooney, the dad, as he dangled like upside down, and not about him. Like, his concern wasn't for his safety, and like everybody else, all the production crew were literally ready to go in if necessary. Like, Donncha was paralysed with fear, but all he cared was get me up, and he kept on roaring at them, get me up, because like the families they're so competitive. And I think for the audience at home, that's what makes it so captivating, because you feed off their passion. Like, you can, like, even with Mary O'Brien, she must have attempted about 10 times to get up that ramp, and a lot of other people would have given up. But she had a great competitive instinct in her, and she was very calm, composed, and it was like, I'll go again. And she eventually got it. Like, I think there's great messages in Ireland's Fittest Family for everyday people, because these aren't professional athletes. These aren't even semi-professional athletes. These are just average people like you and I doing amazing things with their families. And I think that's what grips people. But like you mentioned there, I don't see it, nor do any of the coaches, until ye all see it. So often I'm hiding behind the couch when I watch the episodes because I have no clue what I'm going to say, what I'm going to do. And often I have to ring my mum and kind of pre-warn and go, I don't know now if you should watch this episode. I'm a bit more manic than usual.
And like obviously you're in the thick of competition, so you like all sense of reason goes out the window at that stage. Like
you have like perfectly said. Like for us, it's not a TV show. Obviously, the cameras are there and they're everywhere and they're where you least expect them. But yeah, for us, it's a competition. We want to get the best out of our families. Like I remember one of the years, my family was running through with a log through a bog, and I couldn't go through the bog because I wasn't equipped. I had to still look semi-decent on camera. So I had to jump a fence, and I didn't realize that there was a cameraman on my blind side as I jumped the fence. Took him clean out, like, but I didn't even stop. I kind of half looked back to make sure he was okay, and I kept going. So I wanted to make sure that I get my family to the finish line. So yeah, that's how intense it can get.
And is there much standing around and waiting around when you're filming? Like, because obviously I'm sure there are different contests filmed on multiple days or whatever. So like, is there, like, we were obviously seeing it snap down to the 30 seconds or the 60 seconds. What is it like on the days of filming?
Yeah, like it's a great question. Like we probably arrive on set some days about 6:30 in the morning, and you mightn't finish until the sun goes down. And we film it during the summer, so depending on the weather, it can be long days. But you're right, like the hardest part, I think, for the families is to occupy themselves in that down period. Because if you're doing a time trial and you're against 3 other families and you go first, you have a long time because you have to think of all the setup, like health and safety is at its absolute maximum there. So even when people saw the high Nelly when you're up on the bike, all the harnesses are double, triple checked, like making sure that everything is done according to like the way it is. The referee goes through everything. There's so many briefs. So yeah, you're right. Like you might see 60 seconds or something that maybe took an hour and a half to film. And you do have to be content with that. And like, because you've signed up to it. So what I would always say to my families is like a word of warning is, bring really warm clothes when you're not competing. Bring pillows even to sit. If you're even leaning up against a tree, have a pillow to lean up against it. Bring your iPads, your books, anything just to distract you, because the competition, each challenge might only be 10 minutes at a maximum, less often. And then you could be waiting 2 or 3 hours into the next one. So it is about making sure then that you're recovering and that you're switching off when you don't need to be turned on,
Turned on, yeah. Here, explain that one to me. What is the bike doing up so high? What does that, why is that the case? Like,
to be honest, I think there's 2 reasons. Number one, it's like with the bike being up there, you're obviously testing somebody as well from a height point of view. So a lot of people actually don't realize how uncomfortable they are at a height until they're up there. So like what Ireland's Fittest family always does is it tries to test different elements of fitness, different senses. Like, so you might be very comfortable on a bike, but suddenly you're up, 12, like 20 feet even, and it's a completely different experience. And obviously as well, because the bike is only clipped in by the wheels, it can be quite unnerving moving side to side. And all you're seeing is like the branches of trees that are very high up. So there's that element. And I suppose as well, like there's the novelty element, because no one's going to prepare for that. Like what Ireland's Fittest family always tries to do with families is test them on things that they've never seen before. So when Hang Tough first came out, of course, families that knew they were going to be going in for it practiced Hang Tough, backs against the wall, the same. Like I regularly get messages from families having backs against the wall challenges in their sitting room, and the rows that would be going on, your legs aren't fully right, stop the clock. So what it does is it tests people then from a different point of view. And like, a lot of people were noticing this actually. I spotted on Twitter, you couldn't change the gears. So you had no control over the gradient or switching it up. So even if you are a seasoned cycler, it was a very different experience, because obviously if you're cycling up a hill, you're going to change the gear to release the pressure. But with this, you couldn't. It was all controlled. One person was there with you and they were releasing it for you on an app. So, all of those things can throw somebody, because if you are a cycler, they obviously wanted to make it. If you were someone that was cycling a lot and obviously the miles built up in your legs, it still was a challenge for you because it was very different environment to what you're used to.
Yeah, no, it's a gas one to see the bike up in the air. It's just a funny one. I was going to, Is there any changes you'd like to see? Obviously, you're stuck in the middle of Ireland's Fittest Family. I often thought, and obviously we're in COVID now and things are different. I think in some ways it could lend itself to a live audience. I know logistically it might be difficult, but some of the things. The other thing I was thinking, I know you probably have your own ideas. I would love to see a celebrity element to it, and I'm not a big fan of celebrity shows, but I would love to see a team of yourself, Davy, Donncha, and Derval, maybe against other professionals. I'd love to see you all tackle the ramp and tackle the various different things throughout. It would make for brilliant TV.
And there is a celebrity special that happens every Christmas for charity, but it's a celebrity with their family members. So you're right, like maybe picking four of the Irish rugby team versus four of the Irish.
You have to drop the family element to it. Obviously, that's a key part of the overall show. Yeah. But the challenge is
if there was a charity element to it, and then getting four celebrities, because we've had people come on the show even in the past, like well-known people that have tried them out, just tried out the courses, and again they all say the same thing. Geez, it's very easy at home sitting on the couch giving out about Johnny or Mary not getting over the wall fast enough. But when you're there, it's like you're looking for the door trying to get over the wall. You're wondering, how is this so hard? Like as coaches, we've tried some of them. Like we took each other on in a Hang Tough Challenge a few years ago.
Who won that?
I like to remind Donncha Callan every now and again. I'm like, beat and Derval. So I'm like, so I'm beating a professional rugby player and a multiple Olympian. Okay, I'll take that. And now Davy was MIA that day because he had a match actually down in Cork Queeve. So we were doing it in Cork Docks, and over the water in Cork Queeve, he was managing Wexford. So we were like, did he strategically plan that not to be away that day? And then last year we took on the Backs Against the Wall challenge. So we split up. So it was Davy and I versus Derval and Donncha. So Donncha and I were the guinea pigs having to actually do the challenge, and then Davy and Derval were coaching us. Again, can I just say, I beat Donncha Callan, just want to put that out there. Not that I'm competitive or anything, I swear. So yeah, we've tried the ramp the odd time. A lot of the time, Derval and I in particular would try and sneak into courses if we can, just to get a bit of a look at them. And there's a few challenges this year now. So we've already seen the new challenge, High Nelly, but there's another challenge called Slingshot. And it's every bit as cool as it sounds, let me tell you. Human slingshots. And it's very cool. So anytime we see something new, if we get any bit of notice, like if we're missing from set, it's because we've snuck off. We're trying to practice it to see how we're going to advise our families here. Don't tell I said that, by the way.
Yeah. I didn't look at it's brilliant TV, and it's like it's gas. Like I'm working in the media, obviously. I don't watch much TV, but the only thing, and we watch it collectively, is Ireland's Fittest Family. And my young lad does a wonderful Davy Fitzgerald impression on encouraging people to get out of 6, encouraging people get him up. But,
and so that is what's great about TV, is like it's one of the few shows and tell you that whether you're 6, 16 or 60, that you can all sit down and watch it together, and like different family members will appeal to you, different families will appeal to you as well. Maybe if it's a county rivalry thing, or you go, oh, they're like us, they have the same dynamic as us. And again, like I said earlier on, it is very much about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, and the crack that you can see, like the tension from last night's Eliminator. Like it was probably the closest Eliminator in all of them in 9 years. I mean, Donncha and myself weren't right for hours after it. Donncha was hoarse, night to lie down. I mean, I got so into it that I ran up the ramp with Mary. And what I forgot was her sons were up there ready to catch her. There was nobody ready to catch me. So I was running up the ramp going, oh my God, I have to come back down now. So you get totally into it.
The ramp, what are you like on the ramp, and what would you be like going through the swamp and those things? Like the swamp looks like hardship at the highest degree.
I've got up the ramp now. I mean, it is very difficult, like, but the swamp is a different kettle of fish, because you could be very strong, obviously, like it's all relative to your mass. So even if you've really strong legs, if you weigh a lot more than somebody, you might find it more difficult, because you're carrying your body weight through the swamp, where sometimes it's the lighter people that move to the swamp easier. But if they don't have any sort of lower body strength, they too will struggle. Because I mean, it's literally like sludge. And if you get into, like, people don't realize often, if you see families and they're stuck and they literally can't move, they could be stuck like in an air pocket. Yeah. So essentially, like, they have to be hauled out of it. It doesn't matter what they do. And I remember, I think it was one of the first years that I was involved, I said to my friend, I had a family that was two young fellas in their 20s, of course. you know what, I'm generalizing, but they often think they're invincible. And it was like, I said, whatever you do when you jump into the bog, do not, I was like, and I repeat, do not jump in. Because if you jump into a bog, it's like an oxygen, you get stuck, air pocket. What did both of them do? Literally jumped in, stuck, no moving, like no moving. I nearly went away and got a cup of tea for myself. They just couldn't get out of it. And eventually all the wriggling, they started to maneuver themselves through. But yeah, it's the swamp is always an unpredictable one, which I think is why people love it. It's probably one of my favourite challenges of all of them.
Again, it makes for incredible TV, like just the grimness of being in it. Like, how do you manage to get so many good eliminators? Is there an element of production in the background to that, like, or is it just pure fluke or coincidence? It
is sheer luck. Like, I think if our producers sat down and decided to write out a script as to how they'd like things to go, take even last night's Eliminator. If they decided that they wanted that to happen, it would be the perfect storyline. And yet then it just naturally happens by itself. Like, they obviously have no idea what's going to happen. But every year there always seems to be this element of surprise that is so captivating. Like last year we had like a young 15-year-old go up the ramp on his own. We never saw that happen before. You'll often have rows between coaches that nobody could predict. It always offers up something very different. And I think that's what makes it brilliant, because when the referee says go, like, that's it. There's no take two. There's no, oh, we didn't like that, now let's start again. Like, that's it. So what you see is very much raw footage captured in real time. And probably as well, that's why people like it so much, is because it's not curated. Like, the families are really passionate. They say what they feel. You saw the Moonies last night getting quite emotional. Like, it definitely happens like by pure chance, which is great. Like,
yeah, there is a proper competitive element to it, like, and that shines through. The other thing that the producers do a brilliant job on is portraying the emotion that is in it, and the pride, particularly of fathers, and they're proud of their daughters that are after lugging logs up a mountain or something. And thinking of the Mileys last year, and we had in Laois, we had the McDonald family and the Mars and that, and you can never figure out what is the best combination. I always thought, like, 3 sons and a mother, or maybe a father and 1 daughter and 2. There's always been different combinations that have won it. Like, so it's a hard one to figure out. Look, you mentioned obviously you were bragging there about how good you are at hang tough and at the backs against the wall and that. Obviously you're very competitive, and we're not going to hold that against anyone, but you've done stuff on girls in sport and that previously, and sometimes I think I saw a comment attributed to you at one stage that being described as competitive was nearly sort of a negative thing, and that shouldn't be the case. With I think it was in relation to the time you were on Ireland on Dancing with the Stars, and you were described as competitive. And just I suppose that perception can be a negative thing with females in sport, and it really shouldn't be.
Yeah, like, I think we'll get to the documentary in a second. There was so many learnings for that for me personally, but I also think on a wider scale for coaches and parents. But yeah, I suppose on Dancing with the Stars, like, I was surrounded by, brilliant people from all different backgrounds. And yet anytime I was introduced, I remember one particular time on a radio show, and the competitive one. And I was like, okay, hang on a second. Like, Rob Heffernan is an Olympian. How could you say that he's not competitive? Like, Marty Morrissey has been in the media game for years, and if he's carved out a career, I'm sure he had to be competitive to get to where he wanted to be. Bernard O'Shea the same, etc., etc. And I was like, why is it that I'm seen as the competitive one? And even the way he was saying it, it wasn't a compliment. Oh, she's the competitive one. And I suppose, like, to me often, and I see this even for, and I suppose even in a business context as well for women, often being competitive for a woman isn't seen as a compliment compared to if you said, oh, that fella's fierce competitive. And it's like, if a man is assertive, a woman is bossy, and it's how, like, it's the difference sometimes that people can associate with the word competitive. But, like, ultimately for me, if I ever had a daughter, I would love her to be competitive, because in my opinion, like, being competitive is being ambitious, and it's being driven, and it's just trying to do your best. Not always be the best, because that's impossible all the time, but it's to do your best. And I think that's a really positive message for young girls, to be feeling that they have every right to be just as ambitious as their brothers, or just as ambitious as their husbands, or whatever it is, whether that's in a business setting, sports setting, anything. that it's like you know, you're entitled to be out there and giving it your all and demanding more of yourself and expecting more of yourself. And even, I suppose, in sport, that's why I attribute so much of my competitive streak. Now, genetics, yes, because my dad is fierce competitive, and you know, whether we were running up and down the passage when I was younger, he'd want to beat me, or we were hit the drain pipe, he'd want to hit it before me. So I owe him a lot for that competitive streak. But also, like, I think it's a really positive way to approach anything you're doing, no matter what goal you have. And sport kind of taught me that. It's like, you know, you have to have goals and ambitions. And I suppose often with competitiveness can come a controlled aggression, and that's celebrated in sport. So regardless of gender, like if you're going for a ball or you're jumping over a hurdle or whatever it is, you know, you have to have that controlled aggression, that belief and that competitive drive. And I love the fact that it's promoted and that it's celebrated and it's recognized in sport. And I think we could do a lot to kind of carry that through to other aspects of our lives, you know.
Yeah, because there are skills that are transferable to any life setting, like, and I suppose in previous generations, some of that in girls was sort of discouraged, which wasn't a healthy thing.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like, I found that even doing the documentary, I was speaking to, you know, adolescent psychologists, and they felt that even from a young age, as young girls versus young boys, you're conditioned to think differently. So it's like, boys with boys, they're climbing trees, oh, you know, they'll be grand. Whereas girls, you're, oh, mind yourself, you'll fall, or don't do that, that's not ladylike. So it is, like, language is really important. And I suppose I'm really lucky that both my parents sent my brother and myself out over to the hurling field, and if I came home giving out about a cut or a bruise, you know, they probably stuck a bandage on it and said, you'll be grand. So they never treated us any differently, you know, like, and I think that was a big thing for me, because often we don't give younger people enough credit. And we say, you know, even in the wider media, and like, I work in it myself, so I'm not going to be completely slating, because it's not only the media's role, but the language that's used to describe female sports people compared to male, even, you know, feisty. You know, you would never say a man is feisty, you know, or even fierce to a point. Like, these words, I remember Mick McCarthy, then FAI, they did an awareness campaign before about the language and the importance of language, and you're describing players, and, you know, she's a lovely little player. Like, even that, she's a lovely little player. You'd very rarely say that, a lovely little player from a man's point of view. So it's about making sure that it's a universal language. And people might roll their eyes and go, oh, that's not important. But it is, because I found with the girls, when I did the documentary, Why Girls Quit Sport for RT during the summer, and I was chatting a lot, and I got to know girls. They were inner city Dublin, they were from Ringsend, were brilliant, and they were like, they taught me so much. But when I asked them about, you know, why they didn't have an interest in sport and why it wasn't something that they wanted to do, a lot of them came back and said, but sure, why would I play sport as a girl? Sure, we're not seen as important. You know, we don't matter as much as the boys in our school or the boys in the club or my brothers. And they were saying that back to me, and it wasn't preempted. They were aware of the fact that girls in sport aren't treated the same. And I mean, you said it yourself, you have a boy and a girl, you want equal opportunities to exist for them, just like you do in business, just like you do in every other aspect. And there is a responsibility then on the media, on parents, on coaches, to treat like boys and girls the same, from a language point of view, from a facilities, like, you know, the kind of the old age, don't let the girls on the good grass. You know, and I remember hearing that for years, and we'd be put, even pitches, we were put into the back pitch that hardly was lined out, and the lovely first pitch was there. Oh no, the lads have trained this evening now, so that can't be used. And that does feed into your psyche. And there's massive changes being made now, there really is, compared to even when I was younger, but there is still a lot more to do, and you can learn so much from sport. But for young girls to be aware of the fact that they're not seen as important as the male can, like, that is something that fundamentally we can change.
Yeah, and there are so many little small things that can be changed, like in terms of, you know, my own club, we had a couple of girls who won a Leinster minor football final, and is encouraged that they should be bringing the trophy down to show to the young players, boys and girls. And like, that takes no real effort or organisation, but it just, like, it shows the young boys and the young girls that, you know, these have won a trophy and you're rewarding success. It doesn't matter who has achieved it, but in the past that wouldn't have been thought about. Like, and it's I don't think it's a fault of anybody. I think it's just the way culture
It
and
was always
society
done.
was. It was
Yeah.
how just briefly go back to your own upbringing. Like, was just yourself and your brother. Was sport always a huge part of your life, and driven by your parents? There was a huge encouragement there.
Yeah, there was. I mean, I grew up in Milford, small rural community in North Cork. Apart from the GA club, the Girl Guides and, the local Kyoultas, there wasn't a whole pile to be doing. So we were put into sport as much from a social point of view as anything else, just to make friends, something to do to tire us out in the evening so we wouldn't be going home and eyeing them like they get on board. So yeah, like it was the social point of view first and foremost. And then, I mean, even for myself, people think, oh, sure, it's grand for you. You always had it easy. And sure, of course, you went on to play with Cork. Like, I mean, to call me average when I was younger was paying me a massive compliment. Like, it wasn't until I went into secondary school that I really started to develop as a camogie player. I can still remember being under 12, pulling on the ball, not even feeling confident enough to rise it. So, and I think for me, when I went into secondary school, and when I think about what changed, right? And again, this is another thing that I uncovered in the documentary. It's the environment is key. Like, it is so important that as a manager, we often, give praise and recognition to managers that bring home the trophies, right? They're the ones that get the praise. And it's not the ones that retain their players year after year and that the players enjoy the training of that manager. Like, when I think about playing camogie in St. Mary's Charleville, I won 10 All-Irelands during my time there. But training was so enjoyable. Like, we always had great fun. It was never a chore. And the environment that was created was always like, I'm never going to give out to you for making a mistake. What I'll give out to you for is if you don't try and rectify it. So we weren't afraid to make mistakes. We never felt humiliated or judged. And I think a lot of younger people, boys and girls, but I know a lot of girls feel embarrassed when they make a mistake because they could be roared at or bawled at from the sideline, whether it's from the coach or from parents that, going, what'd you do that for? Again, you're very aware, like no matter what you're doing, you're always aware if you make a mistake. You don't need Johnny on the sideline pointing it out to you. And I think like that, they just became, completely reserved then. And I felt that too, that when it was in an environment where everyone makes mistakes, who cares, work ethic, develop your work ethic to rectify it. It kind of felt then that I didn't have that fear of failure or fear of making mistakes. And like, that's probably the single greatest thing you can learn from sports, is to not fear failure, because as adults, we're terrified of failure and what people would think of us and what people would say. So when I think back to that, the environment that was created was a huge thing for me. So for coaches, even and parents watching this, like, of course you want to win. Like, often when you're involved in a team, you want your kids to do as well as possible, but you have to make sure that you're not isolating kids in the process of that, because they could be the kids that you need to make your 15 team as the ages get up. And if you're like, you've 20 players in 2021 and you win the county, and then the following year you lose 50% of those players because they don't want to come back, well, then you're doing something wrong. Whereas even if you're a manager and you've 20 players in 2021, you've 20 players again in 2022, clubs need to celebrate those kind of managers and hang on to them, because they are just as important, if not more important, than the managers that are focused, hell-bent on winning and saying, well, we'll leave them on the sideline because they're not good enough. And I need to, like, you have to think sometimes of the bigger picture. And I say that being one of the most competitive people you'll probably ever meet, I learned, like, it was like a smack in the face to me that I realized, oh my God, I could be part of the problem here unless I step back and look at the bigger picture, what sport is meant to be for a young person's life. Like, I'm not talking about, 16 plus or adults. I'm talking about young kids, 10, 11, 12. If we become so obsessed with winning, we actually take away the enjoyment of sport. And like, a sport is meant to be an escape from all their worries and stresses. So it doesn't need to be an extra stress for them.
Yeah. Well, what did change for you? Like, obviously you said you're, to describe yourself as average would be a compliment. You ended up captain in Cork to win All-Irelands in Croke Park, All-Stars, all these things. What changed? What was the turning point for you that drove you onto that level?
Yeah, I can remember actually going into first year, and Milford, there was about 7 or 8 girls that we all went in together. And I can remember, you tried out for the team. And in first year, I remember a lot of the girls, and they already had sisters that were in the school, and everyone knew who they were and the name, and she'll have to be on the team. And I remember there was 2 pages went up on a notice board in the hall, like the A team and the B team. And the majority of my friends had made the A team, and I had made the B team. And I remember at the start, I'd be highly indignant, going, oh my God, I'm separated from all my friends. This is a disgrace, and wanted to give the whole thing up. And I went home, and, you know, I remember my parents going, look, you know, what are you going to do about it? Like, you know, like, what are you going to do? You're just going to give up now, or are you going to try? So I remember going back in and just like that. Again, the environment was really good. I always felt like I am a determined person, but there was always room for improvement. There was always encouragement there. There was always, you know, keep going, you're doing great. There was always feedback, and really positive feedback. So it's almost like what I try and do even as a coach is like a positive sandwich. So it's like positive, constructive, negative, finish with a positive. So then it doesn't make the negative things seem as bad to absorb. Like even as adults, we need a bit of that sometimes. You know what I mean? And I found within that first year of school, within about 4 or 5 months, I went from being on the B team to, I can still remember the day our manager, Mr. Vincent Harrington, called me back after class, and he asked me to bring my gear for the A panel. It was the Munster final down below in Newtown Shandon against Shannon. And he asked me to bring my gear. And I was like, it was there and then, it was like I was walking up the steps to Hogan stand. I was like, and all I was doing was sitting on the sideline for the A spot. But for me, that marked the hard work had paid off. And that kind of stuck with me. And like that mantra that hard work will beat talent if talent doesn't work hard. So I quickly started to realize that, okay, hard work is a huge thing here, and you'll be rewarded for the hard work. You know, that idea of what gets rewarded gets repeated. So he was recognizing that I was working really hard. He allowed me to bring my gear and be on the A panel. Within a few months, I was starting on the A team. And the following year, I was the first of all of my friends to make the senior A team. And all that happened in the space of a few months. So, you know, it definitely, confidence for younger people is a big thing. And like, even if they make mistakes, encourage them to keep trying, but then to not reprimand them when they are making the mistakes. Because it's easy to say, I won't give out if you make a mistake. And then they make a mistake and they're roaring and shouting for making a mistake. So yeah, it was a big thing because, you know, and even as I got older, and even when I was captaining Cork, I played a lot in confidence, you know, and I often, you know, because I was blessed with speed, maybe not as much now, but I was blessed with speed. And I remember having to mark the Claire Grogans and the Ursula Jacobs, and, you know, you're marking the big players in the opposition team. So I was a big confidence player, and how I got my confidence was from my prep. So I knew once I prepped well and worked hard and I'd done everything, and often I'd done things that I knew they wouldn't have done, that when I was shaking their hand before I matched, then there was a confidence in me going, you've done everything you can. And even with work now, you know yourself, like working in that world in media and broadcasting, you know, it can be very frivolous, it can be fickle, things change all the time. You know, I'm like, I can't control a lot of things, but I can control my work ethic. I can control how much work I put into whatever I'm doing. And thankfully that has led to opportunities, and long may it continue. Fingers crossed I can pay the mortgage. But, you know, that's ultimately what it is.
Yeah. We actually, I put out on Instagram looking for sort of questions. We knew we were going to have you on today. And one question came in from a young girl. Any advice for someone who's fallen out of love with the sport? And I'm sure that's something that you came across. Obviously, that was a team that you came across, like, you know, 15, 16-year-old girl thinking of giving it up. What do you say to them?
Yeah. And it happened to me actually in 2007. We lost the All-Ireland final to Wexford. We were going for 3 in a row, and they just came out of nowhere and won the All-Ireland for the first time in decades. And the following year, I had an opportunity to go abroad as part of my college course to Luxembourg, and I took the opportunity. So in 2008, I didn't play with Cork. It was really tough, but it was the best thing ever for me because it gave me a bit of time to appreciate what I missed. And you know that kind of way, you don't know what you have till it's gone. And now, thankfully, I know I had a justified reason to take the year out from Cork and to go and to further my studies and stuff. But it gave me a really renewed sense of appreciation for it. And I started to realize that I was overthinking like how I was playing, and I was overthinking my performances, and I was overthinking everything. And I was getting so bogged down with all the stuff that I was doing wrong that I was starting to forget all the stuff that I was actually doing right. So if somebody is falling out of love, and even if you're a parent listening and they're like, oh, they're just, you know, they're not liking it anymore, like find out why, like what is it? And I would often say to myself, even I do this, if whatever I'm doing, like it could be even a work project, and I'll keep saying like, why don't you want to do it? And it could be like, you know, why don't you want to train? It's raining outside. But why? But I don't have the right gear. But why? Because I didn't wash it. But why? And all of a sudden, like if you're drilling down into something, you'll find the real reason. Because often what you tell yourself and what the real reason is, you know, isn't the same. And for me, when I thought back in it, I suppose I had come on to the Cork panel in 2003 in my league insert year. And 2004, I made my senior debut start. In 2005 and 6, sorry, in 2005, I was in my league insert year. So it was my first start. We won the All-Ireland and I won an All-Star. 2006, the same thing happened. And I put such expectation and pressure on myself to replicate that. I got the player of the match in 2006 All-Ireland final. In 2007, the whole way through the year, I kind of felt, oh, but I have to be as good as I was last year. I have to. And in general, it took the enjoyment out of it. Like, it really did. And I think for a lot of younger players, even her, she probably misses the enjoyment. It's the enjoyment you need to get back to. And that's why even managers and coaches need to be really aware of, yeah, it's no problem. You know, you have to do drills and training. You have to make it competitive. But is there enjoyment in the training session? Like, when we won our first Club All-Ireland with Milford, our manager that came in, like, I'd say we used to play some league games and said the opposition teams were looking at us thinking we had a few screws loose. We used to play like stuck in the mud as a warm-up. Like, could you imagine, like, a senior club team, we'd be there running around the place playing stuck in the mud or catching or something, because sure, your warm-up was only meant to warm you up. So whether you do that with drills or whether you do that with stuck in the mud, it doesn't matter. So, but it was always enjoyment, and no matter what happened then, the warm-up set the tone. And if you had a crap day, you switched off and you were looking forward to training because you knew, God only knows what Frankie's going to get us doing today. And it made a massive difference to all of our enjoyment. So it is about finding the enjoyment. And often it might be that maybe a player doesn't feel as good enough. And then it's, well, maybe we can help them with the skills. Maybe they don't feel as included enough. Well, are we isolating players because they're not good enough or they're not fast enough or whatever it is? And it is about feeling accepted. I think it's the biggest thing, that, feeling accepted in a group is really important. So if you're thinking about giving up, go back and just change your perspective. And rather than focusing on all the mistakes you make or all the things you're doing wrong, just go into it. And it's like, what I would say, even in the morning, I would tell myself the mornings that I don't want to train. It's not that I've got to do it. It's I get to do it. Because it's not until you're injured or you're sick that you really appreciate running around the pitch or, going outside for a run. So it's like, I get to do this. And if you look at it through that kind of a lens, it's easier to kind of find your love for it again, But, and in some cases, taking a step back from something is good. It can actually be really good. Like, I often have had advised players to step back from a team that they're in just for a little while, just to gather their thoughts, because you don't want to be a negative influence on anyone else too. But often when you step back from something, you'll realize, oh my God, I really miss it. And you want to go back to it again.
Yeah, it's a good short-term thing to do. Your own retirement what year is that? You were in 27 when you retired, 2015. Yeah, that was sort of abrupt at the time. Was that a hard decision? It was a big decision, obviously. But
it was probably one of the biggest decisions. And I probably came out of retirement about 4 or 5 times in my head in the years afterwards, But I remember at the time, we had won the All-Ireland in 2014 and I'd been honoured enough to have been captain, and I had cracked my shin bone. So I missed the league campaign of 2015. And normally that would have driven me demented. I would be climbing the walls, knowing that I was missing the train, that the girls would be better on the fitness test than me. Like, it just would have driven me mad. But I found I was starting to be thinking more about career. And while I was in a good career at the time, it just wasn't a good career for me. Like, it was in the corporate world. And I kind of felt, oh God, like I'd love to be doing something different. I'd love to be meeting people all the time, and kind of that's what I love. I love working around people as opposed to just kind of sitting behind a computer all day. And I had started to qualify as a performance coach, and it was all around mindset and your values and stuff. So, my dad still, I remember when I told him that I was going to retire, even still to this day, that bloody course, if you didn't do that bloody course, you wouldn't have retired. You got a few more years playing with Cork. But I just started to reassess things, and I realized, like, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. And I was the kind of person that when I was playing with Cork, I wanted to give it 100%, no matter what it was that I was doing. And I always wanted to be at training. And some people are okay to miss the odd training session. It just didn't sit well with me because, like I said, my prep and my confidence was so important. So I thought, you know what? I've played with Cork for 12 years. I've been involved in the Cork senior team since I was 16. It's somebody else's chance now to pick up that jersey and give it everything. So I knew that if I was starting to think about changing careers, and I was like, if I'm going to change careers now and move up to Dublin and trainings in Cork, And you know yourself when you're starting out in any new career, it's always the unsociable hours. You always have to do the things that nobody else wants to do. So I was like, okay, no, I have to give this now all of my focus and everything. And yeah, like, I mean, I can remember being on the Sunday game that September when Cork won the All-Ireland. And I remember my stomach was in knots. Like, I was just like, I'd love to be out there. But again, I knew that they deserved it, not me, because they were the ones that had put in the 9-10 months of hard graft, you know. But
did you miss?
Yeah.
Did it take much to replace that sort of the buzz and that was left empty in your life after that? Like, because that was a huge thing. Huge
gap. And I think I was really lucky because I know a lot of friends of mine that are former professional athletes, and they said like the gap that left in their lives was very hard to fill. And still is very hard to fill. And often at times you'll fill it with something that isn't necessarily very good for you either. Whereas I was really lucky that because I was focused on trying to carve out a new career, that became my focus. And because I was making strides in that world and making progress, you know, and I suppose the world, in a lot of ways, the world of even broadcasting and TV and radio, kind of similar in ways to running out in Croke Park and All-Ireland final day. Because when someone says to you, okay, we're going live in 30 seconds, you know, the nerves are there because you know it's live. And if you feck up, you have to keep going. Just like in a match, you make a mistake, you can't throw the hurley down and say, that's it, no, I'm not playing anymore. So if you're on live TV and you make a mistake, you have to keep going. And you will ultimately make mistakes, kind of how you recover for them. And that adrenaline rush is very, very similar. The energy that I get, now it's never going to replace it. But, you know, it's a good substitute for it. And I suppose that's why I get a bit of a kick, even with Dancing with the Stars, and I got that opportunity. So I grabbed it with both arms because it was a chance to, you know, allow myself to have the competitive instinct kick in again, to challenge myself every week, to, you know, take on other people and try and beat them, like whatever it was a brilliant opportunity. And I absolutely relished it. Like week on week, I loved that experience. So I suppose it is always trying to challenge myself in different ways. And I suppose even becoming a coach in Ireland's Fittest family in itself was like very challenging because, you know, you're involved, but you're maybe involved more from a coaching, like mentor role as opposed to the player. So even learning about that, how helpless you feel sometimes as a coach and mentor, because you can't do a damn thing to perform, but you're trying to give them everything and the encouragement and the advice and the tactics, and then you have to stand back and just let them do it themselves. So, yeah, I've been really lucky, but I suppose like that, every now and again, there's a part of me that goes, geez, I'd love to be back out there in Croke Park.
Do you do any competitive sport now?
Not at the moment, because with COVID and everything. When I moved to Kildare, even like the world kind of just more or less shut down. Yeah. So I didn't do anything. Like it's something that I would love to do in the future. My mum reckons I need to take up a new sport because I'll always be comparing myself to my former self as a camogie player, and now I'm 34, so I'm not the same as what I was when I was 24. So, yeah, she reckons that it's better off to draw a line. So I don't know if I'm finished with camogie yet.
You're not going to play camogie for some club up in North Kildare, or that's not.
We never say never. That's what Davy says. That's the good line. Never say never. So.
Yeah, but or you haven't gone down the routes of triathlons or cycling?
No, that wouldn't really do it for me now. Yeah, that wouldn't really do it. I box actually a bit the odd time above in Unit 3. So Niall is excellent because, again, you're learning a new skill. So yeah, that's keep me on my toes for now, but we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah.
To draw a line. So I don't know if I'm finished with camogie yet.
You're not going to play camogie for some club up in North Kildare, or that's not.
We never say never. That's what Davy says. That's the good line. Never say never. So.
Yeah, but or you haven't gone down the routes of triathlons or cycling?
No, that wouldn't really do it for me now. Yeah, that wouldn't really do it. I box actually a bit the odd time above in Unit 3. So Niall is excellent because, again, you're learning a new skill. So yeah, that's keep me on my toes for now, but we'll see what the future holds.
Yeah. Fire around. Where will I start? Okay, soccer or rugby?
Ooh, rugby.
Rugby. Why?
I've never really. Do you know what? I can never really understand how people can think a game of soccer that ends in 0-0 is a good game. Like, you'll very rarely have a 0-0 game of rugby, but you can very often have a 0-0 game of soccer, and it doesn't appeal to me.
Dublin or Kerry?
Oh jeez. You know, I'm leaning towards Kerry because my mum is from Attain, West Limerick, and right towards the Kerry border. But my husband's a Dub, so I have to say Dublin or he'll kill me. Yeah,
that's even as a Cork woman, though, saying Kerry would be tough. Although you're the hard. Dublin or Tipperary, I suppose, would be probably a harder one.
Yeah, that would have been harder.
Twitter or Instagram?
Oh, Instagram.
Yeah. Why?
Twitter can be a bit of a toxic place sometimes. Like, I wouldn't be going searching my name anytime now on Twitter because I don't know what I'd like to see. I think Instagram is definitely a friendlier environment.
Do you get any social media abuse? It's an awful question for a start. But anyway,
if I went looking for it, I'm sure it is there, to be honest. Like, I try and I suppose block it out for the most part. And like, the reality is when you work, on TV and when you're in the public eye in some way, shape or form, it comes part and parcel of it. So you can't have all the good stuff and then not accept that that's part of it. Like, I don't think it should be. I mean, personally, I couldn't. I'm so glad that I didn't grow up as a teenager in the world of social media. I think it must be so hard because, the reality is if somebody was talking about you back when we were younger, they were talking about you in your sitting room in your kitchen and sure you were none the wiser. Yeah. But now they decide, I'm not going to say it in my sitting room. I'm going to go on here and type it and put it out there for everyone to see. But the one thing I will say to people is I worked in the world of recruitment for a few years before I changed. And once you put something out there, it is out there forever with your name attached to it. And you might be going for a job. You might be going to, and that, because that's what we used to do. We used to get CVs in for jobs. We'd throw the CV away and we'd Google their name and we'd have their Instagram pictures, their Facebook profiles. You would see everything that people put out there. And it could end up costing you a job. So before you hit post, before you hit like publish, I just take a second and be like, do I want this attached to my name forevermore?
You mentioned you obviously worked in the corporate world, a different, obviously completely different space than what you're doing now. How did, that's such a huge change in your parents and people around you, the Anna that was starting out in her early 20s or whatever in adult life is completely different place than what you are now. Did people see that sort of career for you?
No, I mean, I always wanted to be, I always wanted to work in the world of TV and radio, and I loved what Gay Byrne used to do. Obviously the Late Late was an institution and everyone loved watching it on the Friday night because you didn't really have much of an option. And I love the idea that you got to interview people and find out about their lives. But I mean, it was kind of a bit of a pipe dream. If you're telling people I'm going to be a TV presenter, they're like, sure you are. All right, yeah, sure you are. And I'm going to be an astronaut. Often people don't think it's going to happen. But I suppose I didn't leave my career with the intention of, I'm going to be a TV presenter or a radio presenter. I kind of left it to see what else is out there. And I was obviously really lucky because I didn't have any financial commitments, no mortgage, no kids. So when I left it, it was just I want to see what else I could do. I knew I wanted to work in the world of performance coaching and mindset and transferring everything that I'd learned from sport into kind of the world of business. And then on top of that, getting opportunities like Ireland's Fittest family and working in radio kind of made me realize, I do love this. It's funny. I remember one of my friends' dads in about the first 12 months when I'd left my job. And obviously, a lot of parents in particular, they'd be like, that's a grand pensionable job now. What are you going leaving that for in a big company? But my parents were very supportive and they were like, look, if you don't try it, you don't know. So go and try it. And then if it doesn't work out, you can go back to what you already know. And my friend's parent was like, so come here to me now. When are you going to go back and get a real job? I was like, this is a real job. 5 years later, thankfully, I'm still doing it, and long may that continue. But I love my job. I really do. I love being able to work with people and help people. And it's still a bit odd, right? When I go down around home, they wouldn't be long now reminding you that, who you are and where you're from. That's a good thing too. So keep me grounded.
And here, you have a new radio show starting. That's starting in the new year, is it?
It can be starting in the new year on Radio 1 on Sunday evenings. It's health and well-being focused, because I suppose during the pandemic, people started to realise the need for looking after their health and well-being. And, I suppose it's a dedicated show to that. So it'll be expert-led, and obviously it'll be lots. I love the idea of covering lots of different real topics, because often people think of health and well-being, they think, green smoothies and yoga. And obviously they're a very important part of health and well-being. But also, there's really serious topics that are in the world of health and well-being, like perimenopause, that people don't even talk about because people don't even know about. And obviously mental health is definitely being talked about more, but there's so many other things out there that people would probably love to hear more information on and love to hear conversations being normalized. So Sunday evenings from January the 9th. Much like a match again, I'm nervous as hell about it. but I'm also really excited. So bring it on.
And we're getting a bit like an après match episode now. I'm flip-flopping from topic to topic, but do you drive the topics yourself, or the projects that you do, or do people come to you with the ideas, or how does it work?
Yeah, it's a bit of both. Yeah, it's a bit of both, depending. Like, often you'll come up with an idea and you might take it to somebody like the documentary, and then I worked with Anna, who are also the producers of Ireland's Fittest Family, and we made it into an idea. And obviously they're bringing a wealth of experience, having produced numerous TV shows already. So it was brilliant to work with them on that, because that was a topic I probably was sitting on for years and really wanted to do more on. And the same with the radio show, the same with other projects. And yeah, you have people then that would want to work with you too. But I suppose it's like any job. Yeah, like you're never guaranteed the next gig. So you always have to be kind of thinking, you have to be getting creative and finding ways that, you can stay in a career.
Yeah.
So if anyone has any ideas and they want to bring them to me, fire away, I'm open.
Two more quick ones here. McDonald's or Supermax?
Oh, probably McDonald's.
Okay, yeah. Just, you're disappointing me now.
Sorry, Pat. So I will say the chicken burger in Supermax is great now. And after every Saturday night after the nightclub in Charleville, it was always Supermax across the road.
Okay, yeah. And Derval wouldn't give out to you for McDonald's or Supermax, because I have her cookbooks and they're excellent. Like, they're
I have them in the press as well there now. I have to remind her every now and again. I have to put them out on the table when she comes over, just to make it out that we're using them all the time.
Yeah. But your diet is obviously a huge thing for you, and has been. Or was it when you were playing, or had the focus on diet come in as much as it is now when you were playing?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I looked at food as fuel. So I was like, okay, in order to perform at the best of my level, I have to be eating the right foods. And that's always the case. Like, I think sometimes, like, when you hear anyone talk about cutting out food groups or like massively restricting calories, I'd be very worried about it, because like when it comes down to like, yeah, if you want to train hard, you have to be eating the right foods, and you have to be eating the right amount of foods as well. And equally, if you're someone that wants to lean up and drop a bit of body fat, like I used to have to do after every winter, because I wintered very well, it was all about that calorie deficit and eating the right foods that would fill you up, but wouldn't be necessarily calorie dense. But yeah, like I think sometimes people can put so much pressure on themselves when it comes to food, and it's just about making good decisions. Not all the time. Like, I mean, I love pizza. I have chocolate every day. Like, I wouldn't give up my dessert if I went out for dinner. But it's just about being mindful of how often you have them, and then enjoying the food when you're having it. Because nothing worse than eating pizza and the second you would finish feeling the guilt. Yeah. Like, if you're going to eat it, own it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're past the point of no return. Final quick fire question, and it said you're very, very good with your time. Yeah. Davy or Donncha?
Oh, that's a desperate question. Like, choosing between your kids. It depends. It depends. Like, I love both of them. Like, they're great crack, and even our WhatsApp group is, it's always going. Like, Donncha is brilliant to slag you. Like, absolutely. If you want to have a thick skin with him, he's a laugh a minute. He's a really energetic guy, really positive, but he would absolutely split you in half with, some of the things that he could say. He's absolutely like no shame. And then Davy is one of these characters that I am absolutely mad about. He would go to the ends of the earth for you. Like, he really is. I think sometimes people love to hate him and people love to say things, but the vast majority of the time, people that are saying them don't have a clue who he is or what he's about. Like, he has so much goodness in him and does so many things behind the scenes, whether it's like for young kids and people, that might be suffering in some way. And he's so good to give his time to those people, and he would genuinely be somebody, as would Donncha, to be honest, that if I had a problem or I had something that I wanted to bounce off somebody, I go to either of the two of them. I suppose I picked Davy just because I actually thought when I started Ireland's Fittest Family that Davy and I were going to clash. Like, I was fully convinced that we were going to clash, and they ended up being great pals. But yeah, like, it's definitely the two of us who see us in Ireland's Fittest Family. We're both kind of similar in our coaching styles. We both like to, I won't say roar and shout, I say strongly encourage at times. And often we both lose our voice. But yeah, like, I'm very lucky to be able to work with them, and like, working with friends is obviously makes your job that little bit easier to go to at the crack of dawn every morning,
Look, you sound like you love what you're doing, and Ireland's Fittest Family sounds like the best experience ever. Look, Anna said you've been very good at your time. Like ourselves, you're brand ambassadors with Joe Mallon Motors. I hope you enjoyed the time in the Arkana. I'm looking forward to getting a spin of one myself, and hopefully not running out of charge or anything. Somewhere. Anna Geary, thanks very much for your time.
Lovely chatting with you. Take care of yourself.